What's going on, Duke fans? What a fun win it was on Saturday. I'm still smiling from that one. That was a fun game, great team win led by Cooper Flagg, and a quick turnaround, really quick turnaround here as we get ready for this game with Pittsburgh this coming Tuesday, 7 o'clock, I believe on ESPN. And so we have, a post SMU. It was their first year in the ACC. Outside of Boopy Miller, not a ton of familiarity with the team. This time it's different. We are pretty familiar with this Pittsburgh team. A lot of returning pieces from last season's team, which Duke went 1-1 with. Strangely, both teams won the road games. I certainly remember what Mr. Hinson did at Cameron Indoor, going 7 for 7 from 3, and then his celebration post-game, which, listen, I understand some Duke fans may have been bothered by that, but personally, I feel like if you go 7 for 7, and when watching that game, a lot of the three-pointers he hit were contested, tough shots. I almost feel like you can almost do whatever you want post-game. And so 1-1 last year with Pittsburgh. This year, I think, is going to be a little bit of a more difficult test for Pittsburgh. While I do think they might be a little bit better than they were last season. They lost their two leading scorers in Hinson and Bub Carrington. Carrington, going on to be a first-round pick for the Washington Wizards. I just think this Duke team is much better than last year's Duke team. But, that's why the games are played. And so I think it should be fun. We're getting to see Coach Capel come to Cameron. Obviously, we all know Dookie. Great to see him at Duke. I'm sure he's going to have a few tricks up his sleeve, a few things he maybe hasn't tried, some wrinkles that he hasn't shown yet. So we'll have to see what those are. But before we start breaking down Pittsburgh and then getting into the Duke side of things, just want to say thank you for all of the new subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We are just getting started here at Talking Ball, and the season is just continuing to climb. So please make sure you're here for each episode. We'll be back after this Pittsburgh game for the post-game show. So with that being said, what's this Pittsburgh team look like? And it starts with their two guards. It starts with Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett. And Lowe in particular is somebody who I was pretty high on. Like, I thought coming into this year, as somebody who also looks at the draft, he could be a guy who was like a late first round pick, early second round pick. Is what I thought coming into the season, and so far he hasn't done anything to make me feel differently about that. He hasn't necessarily really excelled to make me feel very confident about that prediction, but I think he could be somebody who's in the draft conversation. And why is that? He's not very big. He's 6'2". He's not can be shifty, but he's not the most athletic guy. The one thing about Mr. Lowe is he's a smart player, and he knows how to use angles and changes of speed to create openings for himself. Because like I said, he's not the biggest guy. He's not the most explosive athlete. So he's got to find different ways to score and then also to get his teammates involved. Up until their last game against Stanford, Lowe was leading the conference in assists. He slipped. Now he's second. He's at 6.1 assists per game. He is the really the only true playmaker on this team. Outside of him, the only other guy averaging more than 2 assists per game is Ishmael Leggett, who's more of a scorer. He's at 18 points per game. This is his 5th season in college. He did miss the game before Stanford. He had sprained his ankle during practice, but he's back. So that was something I was curious to see how, how they would look if he wasn't going to play in the game against Stanford, how this video would break down. But he's playing, which is good. I want, every team that Duke plays to be at or near their best. I think it just, you can eliminate some of the questions when that's the case. He's a really good rebounder as a small guard, 6 rebounds per game. Both Leggett and Lowe are good guards at generating steals, just under 2 steals per game for each of them. And Leggett is the more efficient scorer. He just has a better ability to get all the way to the basket, whereas Lowe has to rely more on his mid-range and the three-point shot. And speaking of the three-point shot, it is one area of concern for Pittsburgh coming into this game with Duke, where neither of their top 2 scorers, Leggett nor Lowe, shoot the 3-ball particularly well. I will say both are a little bit below their career averages. Lowe last year was around 35%. I know he's a sophomore, so career average is a little bit maybe strong. He's at 28% this season, whereas Leggett is a career 33% shooter. He's at 30% this year. So there's certainly room for them to regress to the mean and shoot better. I expect them to. Now, this is where the rest of this Pittsburgh team gets a little bit interesting, because the rest of their starting 5, in the last handful of games, has been Cam Corrin, Zach Austin, and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. So let's go through each one. Cam Corrin is a transfer junior from Florida State. He's a power forward. He's not a three-point threat. He can score inside and around the basket. He's a good rebounder and a decent defensive player. There's not necessarily like finesse with his game. He's a good athlete, not a great athlete. He's strong, but there's not a lot of like finesse or necessarily ability to like get around your player, or the player that's guarding him rather. He's got to be set up in that way. Zach Austin, tremendous defender. He is averaging 1.5 blocks per game at basically the small forward position. And this year, opposed to last year, he's shooting the 3 really well, 45% from 3. Last year, he was like high 20s. For his career, he's like mid-30s. He'd spent 2 years at High Point before coming over to Pittsburgh. He is a senior and has been playing pretty well since being inserted into the starting lineup. And Guillermo Diaz-Graham is their last starter, 7-footer. Theoretically, can stretch the floor. Shot it much better last year than he has this year so far, which is interesting because I mentioned Graham, Lowe, Leggett. All of them are shooting worse than they have for their career. Excuse me. But Pittsburgh's offense has been the strength of the team. They've scored 80-plus points in, 8 or 9 of their games this season. So you can see, even with that being said, their offense has been really good. And the guy I skipped over, if you're looking at this, the stats on the page here, Damian Dunn, who's their third leading scorer technically, but hasn't played in their last 6 or 7 games now. The transfer from Houston had spent technically 5 years at Temple, so this is his 6th year in college. He kind of a freak play where he turned his ankle and dislocated his thumb. He did go through warm-ups in the last game against Stanford, but did not play. They said they expect him back within the next week or 2. So there is a chance he plays this game against Duke, which is really important for Pittsburgh if he is able to play, because he is their best three-point shooter on this season, 52%, 53% really, if you round up. And I think the three-point shot is going to be really important for Pittsburgh against Duke, who does a tremendous job at guarding the paint, especially with Malawach in the game. And so other teams need to shoot the 3-ball well to win. And with that being said, this season, only 3 times has Duke's opponent shot 40% or better from 3. 2 of those 3 times, Duke has lost the game. The only other game, those 2 games, as you know, are Kentucky and Kansas. And the third game was the Auburn game, which came down to the wire. So if you can shoot 40%, strangely enough, the only other team that was close was Virginia Tech, who shot like 38%, and that game was not close. So take it for what you will. Coming off the bench for Pittsburgh, they have Brandon Cummings, who did have a 30-point performance. His minutes aren't quite the same, though, with Leggett playing. And if Dunn were to play, he would get very few minutes, but has shown some promising production off the bench. Then you've got Papa Amadou Kante, who's really like he plays pretty sparingly. He is a redshirt freshman, and Jorge Diaz-Graham. That's really their rotation. They don't go much more than 8. I wouldn't be surprised if this game they end up going with 7. Jeff Capel is a true disciple of Coach K, and they don't play too many guys. And with this Pittsburgh team, it really doesn't make sense to. There's not a ton of depth, but what they do have is a team that is playing with a lot of confidence and a lot of chemistry, and they're playing well together heading into this game with Duke. So, the Duke side of things, what are we looking at? How does this Duke team kind of compare? So, when you look at Duke, I'm trying to get this set up here. All right, when you look at Duke this season, we've obviously been led by Cooper Flagg. I don't think you guys need me to tell you that. Cooper Flagg is now top 10 in the ACC in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks, which is just absolutely insane. His efficiency has improved over the past couple weeks. He's now at 30% from 3 after spending the majority of the season in the low 20s. And has just been, not only has Cooper been improving pretty much game after game, but so has this team. And look, Pittsburgh is pretty good. They are 23rd overall on KenPom. 23rd overall on KenPom, 17th on offense, 43rd on defense. They do a pretty good job. They don't turn the ball over. So that is going to be something where, how Duke will be able to kind of generate easy buckets for themselves. Pittsburgh has wins over West Virginia, LSU, and Ohio State, and their losses are to Mississippi State and Wisconsin. I think when you look at this game for Duke, it comes down to a couple of things. One, the defense. Can they come out with the defensive intensity that that has been their hallmark throughout this season? I think they will. Can they force Pittsburgh to shoot more three-pointers than they want to? Because going back quickly here to the Pittsburgh stats, as I said, their 2 best scorers or 2 leading scorers aren't good three-point shooters. The strength of Duke's defense is forcing other teams to shoot the ball from either mid-range or from 3. And ideally, it's contested because it's really hard to get into the paint with Duke's size. I think Pittsburgh is going to struggle with that in this game against Duke. I find this to be a hard matchup for this Pittsburgh team with the 2 smaller guards against the size and the depth of this Duke team. And the guys who do shoot the 3 well, Zach Austin, Brandon Cummings, they don't get enough shots to have a big. Maybe Jorge Diaz-Graham, maybe the Diaz-Graham brothers can kind of get going. That is one thing that I would say favors Pittsburgh, is that they might be able to keep Cooper Flagg out on the paint, or out of the paint rather, and if he's attached to Guillermo Diaz-Graham or Zach Austin. But I almost wonder if Duke will try to change some of their defensive assignments to be able to allow Cooper Flagg to roam a little bit more, and maybe he takes on I don't know, actually. I was going to say maybe he takes on a Leggett, but I think they'll just have, Sion James and Tyrese Proctor, their 2 best perimeter defenders, take on the 2 guards from Pittsburgh. So that is one area where Pittsburgh might be able to exploit. If Cooper, comes into the paint, maybe they can kick out for a 3 to one of the Diaz-Graham brothers. So that is one thing to keep an eye out for. And I think really the other keys for Duke is, can Khan continue his hot shooting? He's got off to not got off to. He found himself in a cold stretch after the first couple of games of the season. And then I would say the Georgia Tech game seemed to be when he turned the corner. And if he can continue to shoot the ball well, it just makes life easier for everyone else. So that's another thing I'm looking forward to. Also, who guards Con Knippel? Is it Zach Austin? I could see Zach Austin drawing the Cooper Flagg assignment. That's the other area I'm worried for Pittsburgh in the sense of how they match up with Duke. I see how Duke can match up with Pittsburgh, but Zach Austin can only guard one of, Cooper Flagg or Con Knippel, which means Guillermo Diaz-Graham has got to guard the other. And I don't think it's a good matchup either way. So we shall see. With that being said, I think the other things to look out for from the Duke side of things are minutes. I mean, quite frankly, there's not a lot of negatives to say after the last game. So there's not too many question marks that I have coming into this game. We pretty much know. We know what the starting five is going to be. We know the four guys coming in off the bench. We have a sense of what they're going to look like. Just a question of consistency for this Duke team as we get into ACC play. I think this isn't going to be the matchup where we see maybe Duke kind of dip to the level of their opponent. I don't think that's going to be the case. I hope we get Coach Shire back on the sidelines for this one. Just would be great to have him back. Hopefully he's feeling better. And I think the real question for Duke during ACC play, like I just said, is can they maintain their level when they're playing against some of these other teams in the ACC that aren't quite up to snuff? And I don't think that's going to be the case this Tuesday. Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster can speak to the fact that Pittsburgh, maybe a slightly different Pittsburgh team, but a lot of the same players, Lowe, Leggett, Zach Austin, and the Diaz-Graham brothers were all around last season. So they can point to the fact that, Duke, we lost to this team last year at Cameron. And more importantly, I think this is probably the third best team in the ACC. I think I'd have Clemson ahead of them, but that's it as of right now. So I don't think there's any reason that Duke should, be underestimating this Pittsburgh team. They're very good. They're coming in hot. They've played well recently. It should be a good game early, but I think Duke will pull away late and win by 10 to 15 points is my prediction for this game. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know also what you guys think we could do to improve some of the visuals of the channel. I definitely want to try to get a better title graphic. So if you guys have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. Please like this video. It helps us grow, and share it with all of your Duke basketball friends and NBA draft friends as well. And I'll see you guys after the game with Pittsburgh, somewhere around 9 o'clock Eastern time Tuesday night. Until then, peace.